الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد معدن الجود والكرام منبع العلم والحلم والحكم وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم. Just to continue with the topic that we left on the virtue and merits of spending in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are many subtopics that we actually related, and this topic is about spending on your family, on your friends, spending whatever you can, the ability that you have. Allah has given you the ability to spend in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then spend as much as you can. So just to continue with a few ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Imam al-Sha'rani radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates a hadith. He says, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, إِنَّ الْعَبْدَ لا يرزق رزق سنة في شهر, that a person is given the rizq, the sustenance of a whole year in 1 month. This is the barakah which Allah gives to a person who spends in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The rizq of an entire year is given in 1 month. فَإِنْ رَفَقَ بِهِ كَفَاهُ وَإِلَّا احْتَاجَ فِي بَقِيَّةِ سَنَتِهِ. If he then spends that amount of wealth which he is given in that month, he spends a portion of it willfully, sincerely, in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this entire rizq of 1 month will suffice him for that entire year. Allah will put immense barakah in it, as in the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the food for 2 people suffices for 3, the food for 3 people suffices for. There's immense barakah, that when you spend on people, when you do ihsan on them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts immense barakah in that wealth, in that sustenance. And here the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that in that month, if you spend the amount of rizq which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given, not all of it obviously, a portion of it, and a portion that you spend on your family, on your friends, on yourself and so forth, that is set aside. But apart from that, you spend in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through that rizq of 1 month, He will make it sufficient for the entire year. وَإِلَّا احْتَاجَ فِي بَقِيَّةِ سَنَةِ. If not, if you restrict it, then the barakah is taken away, and then you then have to earn and gain money. You then have to be dependent on other people throughout the entire year. That wealth is not sufficient for you. Because of the barakah of spending on people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts barakah in your wealth. وَإِنَّ الْعَبْدَ لَيُرْزَقُ رِزْقَ شَهْرٍ فِي جُمُعَةٍ فَإِنْ رَفَقَ بِهِ كَفَاهُ وَإِلَّا احْتَاجَ فِي بَقِيَّةِ الشَّهْرِ. And a person, a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is given the rizq of an entire month in 1 Jumu'ah, on 1 Friday. And Friday is a special day of where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala distributes the rizq, and especially the time between Subh Sadiq, which is the break of dawn, until sunrise. The awliya say that is the time where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala distributes the physical rizq, the apparent rizq, sustenance, wealth. And a person who remains in that time of dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens the doors of rizq for him. And this is why people who do not wake up for Fajr Salah, miss their namaz, their rizq is restricted, the barakah is taken away from their rizq. They are continuously pursuing the dunya, and the dunya is running away from them. They cannot have the satisfaction of the heart, contentment of the heart, which Allah puts in the heart of a person who wakes up for the Fajr Salah and spends that time, that special time between the Subh al-Sadiq until the sunrise, in the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah puts immense barakah in his wealth. And then Imam Shaykh rahmatullah also narrates from his Shaykh Ali al-Khawas rahimahullah, who says, the spiritual rizq, the ruhaniyyah, the spiritual rizq is distributed from the time of Asr until Maghrib. And that is a time where you have to control your nafs immensely. The awliya state There's a narration that Iblis lays his throne on the water between Asr and Maghrib. And then you have your own Hamzad, which is the shaitan within you. Your own counterpart, your Hamzad. And it is only for the Prophet ﷺ that his own Hamzad, his own counterpart, the shaitan, embraced Islam at the hands of the Prophet ﷺ. In the incident of Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj, Al-Azhari states, there's many people who have narrated many different interpretations of this narration that I'm going to relate to you, that in the heart of the Prophet ﷺ, when the heart was taken out, ﷺ, Jibreel alayhi salam said, Subhanallah, Aynani tubsiran wa udhunani tasma'an. Subhanallah is kalimatu ta'ajjub. It is a word which is said when you see something quite marvelous, quite wondrous, quite amazing. He says, Subhanallah. Two eyes within the heart which perceive knowledge, which see knowledge of the unseen, and two ears which perceive and hear knowledge of the unseen. Subhanallah. Within the heart of the Prophet ﷺ. And then the narration says that there was a black dot or a stain on the heart of the Prophet ﷺ. Imam al-Subki at this point he says, this black dot on the heart of the Prophet ﷺ is he says, a portion of the satanic influence which is natural for every single person who is born into this world. It may not necessarily have an influence, especially to the prophets, but it is just there, and that was removed. However, Allah says, at this point, what a beautiful interpretation he says, and you can, mashallah, just say subhanallah at this interpretation. He says, that black stain was not the influence of shaitan, that was the portion of the mercy of the Prophet ﷺ that would have benefited shaitan on Yawm al-Qiyamah. But that was removed, that shaitan will not even have the slightest portion of the mercy of the Prophet ﷺ. Because he's rahmatul lil alameen. Okay, but that was removed, so the shaitan will not benefit on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Okay, anyhow, what was I talking about? Yes, about the spiritual rizq and so forth. It is distributed between Asr and Maghrib. The Iblis puts his throne on the sea, and he asks your counterpart, my counterpart, the Iblis, what have you done today? What have you done to incite him towards sin? And people give him different methods and so forth, and then he gives them mashwara, that you do this to him, you do this to him, you influence him in this manner, and so forth. And this is why the ulama prescribe a wazifa that you should pray after the Asr Salah. Obviously this is a wazifa that you should recite after Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib and Isha. It's called Panjiganji Qadiriyah, the 5 gems of the Qadiri Tariqah, read by Ghusi Azam himself, as related in the book Al-Fuyudat Al-Rabbaniyah fil Awrad Al-Qadiriyah. Ghusi Pak used to read this tasbih after Fajr, Ya Azizu Ya Allah, after Dhuhr, Ya Kareemu Ya Allah, after Asr, Ya Jabbaru Ya Allah. Ya Jabbar, O the vanquisher, O the most powerful one. That when you read that tasbih, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you power to overcome your shaitan, inshallah. After Maghrib, Ya Sattaru Ya Allah, and after Isha, Ya Ghafaru Ya Allah. Anyhow, so that rizq is given in one Jum'ah, the rizq of 1 month. فَإِن رَفَقَ بِهِ كَفَاهُ وَإِلَّا احْتَاجَ فِي بَقِيَّةِ الشَّهْرِ. If he spends it in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give him so much barakah in that rizq which he gave him on one Friday that it will suffice him for the entire month. وَإِنَّ الْعَبْدَ لَيُرْزَقُ رِزْقَ جُمُعَةٍ فِي يَوْمٍ فَإِن رَفَقَ بِهِ كَفَاهُ وَإِلَّا احْتَاجَ فِي بَقِيَّةِ جُمُعَةِ. And a person is given the rizq of a whole week in one day. And if he spends in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that rizq which he has been given in one day will suffice him for the entire week. If he does not spend a little portion of it in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he is again dependent. He needs to now find rizq, and he is like pursuing the dunya and so forth. And this is why the ulama have also recommended, prescribed something that will increase barakah in your wealth, that people who get paid weekly, or even if not paid weekly, if you on every Jumu'ah give something, £5 or whatever you can, £2, whatever is your capacity, and send it put it aside as sadaqatun nafila for the sarithab of Ghusi Pak radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Allah will put immense barakah in your wealth. And this has been mujarrab, experienced by the awliya ulama, and they have said anyone who does that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never make him face poverty, inshallah. And then there's another hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, anfiq, which when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to Hazrat Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu, inciting him to spend in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anfiq. وَلَا تَخْشَ مِنْ ذِي الْعَرْشِ إِقْلَالًا. Spend and spend and spend, and do not fear of any poverty from the one who possesses the great mighty throne, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, spend in the way of Allah subhanahu, have yaqeen in Him. Sayyidina Nafisa radiallahu ta'ala anha, I think the great granddaughter of Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba radiallahu ta'ala, Mazar Sharif is in Cairo, and Imam al-Sha'rani radiallahu ta'ala did mention and affirm and ascertain from his sheikh, who was a great sheikh of Mukashafa. For example, you go to a mazar and you are in doubt, but obviously when you go to a mazar, a grave of a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have yaqeen that the wali is there. Some people put doubts in you, in your mind, and say, okay, his mazar sharif is there, and it's also in Iraq, it's also in Syria. Wherever you go, have full certainty their ruh will be present. Okay? Even if you call them here, and you had that yaqeen, their ruh will be present, and it will help you inshallah. And he did confirm from his Shaykh Ali Khawas rahmatullahi that Hazrat Nafisa radiallahu ta'ala anha, Hazrat Aisha bint Imam Jafar as-Sadiq, Imam al-Husayn's Ra's al-Mubarakah, his blessed head, Hazrat Sayyidah Zainab bint Ali radiallahu ta'ala anha, and Imam al-Shafi'i and other, obviously Imam al-Shafi'i was Muttalibi, Qarashi, and the other Ahl Bayt of the Prophet ﷺ are actually 100% in Cairo as they stand today. Okay, he confirmed that. Some people give us different narrations that Imam al-Husayn radiallahu ta'ala's blessed head is buried in al-Baqi al-Sharif. Some people say it was taken to a place and no one knows where it has been buried. But the most sound opinion, which has been authenticated by awliya and salihin and by rigorous reports, is that his blessed head Mubarak Sharif is in what is named today as Al-Husayn, Maidan Al-Husayn, next to opposite Al-Azhar Mosque, Al-Jami Al-Azhar, and next to your shopping mall, Khan Khalili. Anyhow, so he has confirmed. Sayyidina Nafisa radiallahu ta'ala anha, she was someone who used to spend abundantly in the way of Allah subhanahu. Whatever used to come, she used to spend abundantly in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once she only had 1 dinar. Her khadima radiallahu ta'ala anha, she said, "Oh, our master, we've got nothing to buy or to purchase any food for the evening. Would that you would keep and preserve this dinar so we can buy some food with it." Sayyidina Nafisa radiallahu ta'ala anha said, "I have tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala," and a khadim, someone came, a beggar, a sa'il, and she gave that dinar to him, and she went away. And then that sa'il went away. Then Hazrat Nafisa radiallahu ta'ala anha told the khadim, "I have yaqeen in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when He says in the verse of the Quran, in man ja'a bil hasanati falahu ashru amthaliha." Whoever gives brings 1 good deed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will multiply it by 10. She then said, "I have yaqeen that I gave 1 dinar, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring to me 10 dananir." And there was a knock on the door immediately as she said that, and there, lo and behold, there was a man holding a bag and said, "Someone has given this as a gift to you," said Nafisa, and when it was opened, there was exactly 10 dananir in it. Okay, yaqeen, tawakkul. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you immense barakah in your wealth. There are people in this day and age, especially the massacres that are happening in Sham, in Syria. Homs, for example, the prime city, which is faced with a humanitarian crisis. No medicine there, no food there. People are being killed. There's carpet bombs everywhere. People are using artillery, machinery to bomb civilians, to kill them. Merciless people, the Alawite Shias, merciless people who do not have any slight mercy to any human being, let alone a Muslim, living in the great lands of Barakah of Asham, and they are killing innocent civilians, children, women, as you hear every single day in the news. And you spend on those people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not make you face those situations. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will suffice you for this dunya and the akhirah. Spend on them. Spend on people in the other parts of the world. Don't restrict your wealth. As the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you restrict your wealth, Allah will restrict His bounties upon you. Don't start counting your wealth, or your ni'mah will be counted. It will be restricted. Anyhow, now let us look at this incident. In fact, this statement of Imam Ali Khawas rahmatullah alayh, where he says, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, لِكُلِّ خُلُقٍ مِنْ أَخْلَاقِ النُّبُوَّةِ كَرْبٌ فِي مُقَابَلَةِ تَرْكِهِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. every action of akhlaq al-nubuwwah, every moral character of the, or sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, if you miss it, if you forsake it, if you neglect it, you will have to face anxiety, or you will have to face the punishment of it on Yawm al-Qiyamah. He says this. He says, لِكُلِّ خُلُقٍ مِّنْ أَخْلَاقِ النُّبُوَّةِ كَرْبٌ فِي مُقَابَلَةِ تَرْكِهِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. If you miss any sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, which you have known and you missed it, you will have to face its punishment on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Any character of the Prophet ﷺ. So he says, فَمَنْ لَمْ يُطْعِمْ لِلَّهِ جَاءَ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ جِيعَانًا. Anyone who did not give food, anyone who did not give in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to people who are struck with hunger, he will come hungry on Yawm al-Qiyamah. He will come struck with hunger on Yawm al-Qiyamah. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَسْقِ الْمَاءَ لِلَّهِ جَاءَ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ عَطَشَانًا. Whoever did not give water to someone who was thirsty, he will come on Yawm al-Qiyamah with thirst. وَمَنْ آذَى النَّاسَ جَاءَ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ يُؤْذَى. Whoever inflicted harm on people, he will come on Yawm al-Qiyamah and Allah will inflict pain on him. Harm will be inflicted on him on Yawm al-Qiyamah. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَسْتُرْ مُسْلِمًا لِلَّهِ جَاءَ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ مَهْتُوكًا مَكْشُوفَ السَّوْءَةِ عَلَى رُؤُوسِ الْأَشْهَادِ. Whoever does not cover the uyub, the defects of people, by exposing people in the gatherings, by ghiba, by namima, by taking ridiculing people in front of other people, tarnishing their honor, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open his defects in front of the thousands of people and count people on Yawm al-Qiyamah. And that's why there's a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Man satara musliman satarahu Allah yawm al-Qiyamah. Or kama qala Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Whoever conceals the defect of a Muslim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will conceal his defects on Yawm al-Qiyamah. And then he says, وَمَنْ لَمْ يُنَفِّسْ عَنْ مُسْلِمٍ كُرْبَةً جَاءَ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ مَكْرُوبًا. Whoever does not eliminate a calamity from a person in this dunya, he will come on Yawm al-Qiyamah surrounded with calamities. وَمَنْ لَمْ يُسَامِحْ أَحَدًا فِي حَقِّهِ كَانَ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ تَحْتَ أَثَرِ مَنْ لَهُ عَلَيْهِ حَقٌّ. Whoever does not forgive people who have violated his own rights, he will come on Yawm al-Qiyamah under the shackles of those people whose rights he violated, i.e. they will not forgive him on Yawm al-Qiyamah. You forgive people now, Allah will make others forgive you on Yawm al-Qiyamah. وَمَنْ ازْدَرَى بِالنَّاسِ أُزْدُرِيَ هُنَاكَ. Whoever deems people as inferior, looks down upon them in this dunya, but has pride and haughtiness and is arrogant in this dunya, deems people as inferior, on Yawm al-Qiyamah he will come and he will be humiliated before people. About the people who had kibr in their hearts, the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, they will be, as you can say, minimized, diminished to the size of an ant on Yawm al-Qiyamah, and the people of Fir'aun will come like a stampede and walk over them, people who had arrogance in their hearts. Allah will show them on Yawm al-Qiyamah the punishment of having kibr, arrogance. Have tawadu', man tawada'a lillah rafa'ahu Allah. Whoever humiliates him, or whoever has humbleness in fact, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah will elevate his status, inshallah. Just one final hadith, inshallah, narrated by Imam Bukhari Muslim radiallahu ta'ala anhuma. He says, مَا مِنْ يَوْمٍ يُصْبِحُ الْعِبَادُ إِلَّا وَمَلَكَانْ يَنْزِلَانِ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ. There is no day in which there is no morning in which a servant wakes up, only that two angels descend. Another narration it says, they stand on the doors of Jannah and they say, one of them says, Allahumma a'ati munfiqan khalafan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase the wealth of those people who spend in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Increase it. Every single morning, the angels are making dua for people who spend in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَيَقُولُ الْآخَرُ اللَّهُمَّ أَعْطِ مُمْسِكًا تَلَفًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroy the wealth of those people who restrict their wealth from people, who constrain it, who don't spend in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this dua, the dua of the angels, is accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let us be from those people for whom Allah increases their wealth by us spending sincerely in His way. May Allah give me the tawfiq to do this, inshallah. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد معدن الجود والكرم منبع العلم والحلم والحكم وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم. اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا من فضلك علما يقربنا منك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من علم لا ينفع، من قلب لا يخشع، من نفس لا تشبع، من دعوة لا يسمع. اللهم آت نفسي تقواها وزكيها أنت خير من زكاها، أنت وليها مولاها فاغفر لها. اللهم ارزقنا علما نافعا ورزقا حلالا طيبا واسعا وعملا متقبلا وشفاء من كل داء. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد معدن الجود والكرم وآله وصحبه وبارك وسلم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون